The Germans launched Operation Fall Blau on the 28th of June 1942, roughly 1 year after Barbarossa had started. Army Group B moved towards Stalingrad, while Army Group A moved towards the Caucasus to get the oil. But what was it like for the Germans to move on Stalingrad? What were their expectations? And was Hitler really obsessed with Stalingrad? That's what you're gonna find out today. And welcome back! I'm back from South America. There's gonna be a lot of videos about South America, but also about the Second World War. And now you're watching one of my favorite series, the German perspective on the Second World War. If you find this interesting and you have not subscribed yet, please do so and also hit that notification bell. As Fall Blau was launched on the 28th of June 1942, it would originally take 3 stages. First to capture Voronezh, then encircling the Soviet forces in the Great Band of the Don, and then advance towards Stalingrad and Astrakhan to protect the northern flank. Capturing the city of Stalingrad wasn't really that necessary as long as the Soviet Red Army could not use the city as a base to attack the Germans from the north. Initially it went well. Voronezh was taken and Rostov fell. Rostov was the gateway to the Caucasus, to Maikop and Grozny. There was oil in abundance, and that was Hitler's main goal. Hitler deviated from his plan by Führer Directive number 45 on July 23, 1942. Army Group A would move to the Caucasus and B would go for Stalingrad, the city that bore Stalin's name. 5 days before, on July 18th, a German soldier wrote the following: "I believe our target for now is Stalingrad. At least that's what I got from a soldier in the tank unit. In our sector, the Russians are running so fast that we can't keep up with them with our vehicles, and our daily marches don't lie, 50 to 120 kilometers, when we will arrive in Iraq." Now some people claim that Hitler was obsessed with the city of Stalingrad because the city bore Stalin's name, the name of his arch rival. But is this really the case? Now, Stalingrad, which is now called Volgograd, was before the Russian Revolution named Tsaritsyn. From 1918 till 1920, the Battle of Stalingrad took place during the Russian Civil War. Stalin was involved in the defense of the city and fought against the White forces. The battle for the city was often shown in Soviet propaganda, and because the city was named after Stalin, it would explain why Hitler did not want to pull back no matter the dire circumstances that developed during the battle. But is it true that Hitler desperately wanted to capture the city because it was named after Stalin? No, well, on the 30th of September, Hitler stated the following: "The objective was an area between the band of the Don and the Volga and the town of Stalingrad, not because the town bears Stalin's name, which is unimportant, but exclusively because it is a strategically important area." We're in the second half of July 1942. The 6th Army, that was led by Friedrich Paulus, was on the move. Most of the men marched on foot. Motorized divisions could drive to 200 kilometers on a single day. Their aim was to cross the Don Bend, move and take Stalingrad, and from there advance to Astrakhan in the southeast. This would secure the north flank of the other Axis armies that moved south into the Caucasus. And that's where the oil was, which was the main goal of the 1942 German summer offensive. Paulus's army consisted of 5 infantry divisions, 1 armored division, 2 motorized divisions. Paulus had therefore 120,000 men and 170 tanks. They had major supply problems, being roughly 2,000 kilometers away from Berlin. And many of the supplies that were initially meant for Army Group B went to Army Group A, that went to the Caucasus, instead. The men were ordered to live off the land. It is what we saw during Barbarossa as well. And thus large-scale lootings occur as they advance through the steppe. Now many, if not most, Soviet people who died in German-controlled zones in the USSR died because of starvation. In the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, or Kharkov as it was called back in the day, 150,000 out of 450,000 people perished, which was 1/3 of the population. It's certainly a topic I want to explore more in the future, so subscribe if you have not already. The Germans pushed on. The rearguard Soviet army troops they met surrendered immediately. However, the bulk of the Soviet forces wasn't captured as these retreated further east. Now, among historians there is a discussion whether or not this was a planned retreat or just a chaotic rout. Either way, it was a huge difference if you compare it with Operation Barbarossa. Sure, during Operation Fall Blau, the Germans captured many Soviet soldiers in the tens of the thousands, and that's a lot. But during Barbarossa, they captured several millions. And it created the false impression that the Soviet Red Army was on its last legs. On the 29th of July, a German soldier wrote the following. The company commander says the Russian troops are completely broken and cannot hold out any longer. To reach the Volga and take Stalingrad is not so difficult for us. The Führer knows where the Russians' weak point is. Victory is not far away. Now this was not the case. Sure, the Red Army did have a hard time. They had a severe lack of officers, and many conscripts were just hurled into battle after just a few days of training. The Germans never ceased to be astonished at the prolificity of Russian commanders with their men's lives. One of the worst examples came during the defensive battles west of the Don. Their Soviet commandant, who surrendered after the massacre, told his German captors that when he had protested about this senseless task, the Soviet army commander, who was clearly drunk, had bellowed at him to get on with it. The Germans didn't have an easy time either, but for different reasons. Many of them fell ill, and there was a lack of water, especially because the Soviets polluted many of the wells as they retreated. Despite the disasters and chaos from bad communications, Red Army troops continued to fight. A German company commander wrote the following in his diary. Russians resisting hard. These are fresh troops and young. They are getting reinforcements all the time. One of our sapper companies avoided battle. Very shameful. It's terrible here. Such terrifying nights. Every single one of us is tense. One's nerves don't stand a chance. On other sectors, Germans got overconfident because they destroyed so many Soviet tanks, either from land or via the air, led by Luftwaffe General von Richthofen. On the ground, one Panzer crewman explains this. Whenever a Russian tank was hit, almost every Panzer in the battle claimed it as a kill. Now, whatever the exact number of Soviet tanks destroyed during the offensive might be, it gave the Germans a sense that victory was near. The Russian Hydra could not go on forever growing more heads for them to cut off. Upon reaching the Don, the Germans looked to the town on the opposite side of the river, Kalach. They deemed it as highly primitive and they made jokes about it. Soon leftover Red Army troops on the west bank of the Don attacked, and however these stragglers were soon defeated, many German soldiers did not share the optimism of their commander Paulus, because of the high amount of casualties within their own ranks. One German soldier was shocked by the sight of the many crosses, and he saw how many of his comrades had fallen in battle. Another German was stunned by the fact that they had to deal with 72 corpses on one day. Now, sure, the Red Army had higher losses, and there are also instances that Germans had higher losses than that, but it sure made an impact. What you see during the drive on Stalingrad is that some were very optimistic and others not so much. Here is an example of a German soldier who looked more optimistic. The Russians can shoot as much as they want, but we'll shoot more. It's a great pleasure when a couple of hundred Russians attack. One self-propelled assault gun is enough, and they all make a run for it. At the dawn of the 21st of August, German forces crossed the Don in assault boats and secured a bridgehead. Soon, pontoon bridges were constructed in order for armed units to cross. On the 23rd of August, Stalingrad underwent a massive bombardment. As Stalingrad was burning in the distance and pillars of smoke emerged from the city, German soldiers took triumphant photographs of it. In a short time, they had managed to get from the Don to the Volga, and they believed they were at the border of Asia. Many soldiers believed the war was as good as over. One soldier who served in the 389th Infantry Division wrote home the following. You can't imagine the speed of our dear motorized comrades, and with us the rolling attacks of our Luftwaffe. What a feeling of security we get when our pilots are above us, because you never see any Russian aircraft. I would like to share with you a little glimmer of hope. Our division will have fulfilled its duty as soon as Stalingrad falls. We should then, God willing, see each other again this year. If Stalingrad falls, the Russian army in the south is destroyed. By mid-September, German forces began their assault on Stalingrad. Street-to-street fighting ensued as the Germans encountered fierce resistance from Soviet defenders who employed urban warfare tactics to slow down the German advance. The Battle of Stalingrad would eventually turn into one of the most brutal and significant battles of the Second World War, with both suffering heavy casualties. If only that single German pioneer soldier knew what was to come when he wrote the following somewhere in August 1942 after a day of battle outside Stalingrad. The only consolidation is that we will be able to have peace and quiet in Stalingrad, where we'll move into winter quarters, and then, just think of it, there'll be a chance of leave. If only he knew. If you haven't seen the other videos about the German perspective on World War II, click here. Now, about the battle in and around Stalingrad, there's a lot of it, and I will not be covering it in detail as much as another YouTuber does. Tick History, Battlestorm Stalingrad. If you're into it, click right here. See you later.